Hello, everybody, and welcome to a joint episode of Breaking Ground with Steve Kliegerman and Cross the Line with Greg Heym. You know who we are, hopefully, but we have a very special guest. We're here at the Real Deals New York City Forum, and we have Professor Vicki Been here, who is a professor of public policy at Wagner Graduate School and a whole bunch of other cool things, most notably former deputy mayor for housing and economic development and commissioner of HPD. So nobody can answer these questions better than you. We are honored to have you here, Vicki. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
We were listening to your forum in there, and it was very, very interesting. You know, 485X is the big story in housing development. Finally, you have a 421A. I joke that the fact that the number is so much higher tells you how long it took to get this. It is, for those of you who don't know, it is the section of the real property tax law.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of celebrating going on, other than maybe the length of the program, that it lasts a little longer than others. What do the people really need to know about the prospects for how much housing will actually come from this?
Well, so I think the first thing is to know that it is essential to have a tax incentive, right? It's too costly to build in New York City, and our property taxes are too high, and they are also unequal between renters and homeowners, and so you need some sort of tax incentive, right? And we know that, for example, over the last 10 years, we got about 123,000 units financed in part by 421A, the old program. So the first thing is it's essential. But the second thing is, will this do the trick the way that former versions have done? And there are reasons to worry, right? There's a very substantial labor requirement that's tricky to implement. Very difficult.
And apparently very tricky to monitor because prevailing wage
really
changes.
Hard to follow and monitor and make sure that you're in compliance.
Right. And, you know, that's just a nightmare in terms of a developer worrying about, you know, is there going to be a headline that I'm not paying my workers what I'm supposed to be paying them? The agencies all worry about that risk as well. And the agencies are not adequately staffed to do that monitoring, right? The prevailing wage changes on a schedule. A worker may think, no, I know prevailing wage on the schedule says it's, $74, but then it changes in 6 months and it's different, and then there's a lot of confusion.
There was the comment about how this is going to cost the lower wage construction workers jobs. Do you see that as a possibility? Because that's one of those things that maybe they didn't think about up in Albany when they passed this.
I think it's always a possibility. I mean, when your labor costs are high, you obviously try to get the lowest wage worker to do the job that you can, but you're not going to hire an unskilled worker if you need somebody with skills to do other things.
Right.
So,
and if you're paying a wage now that you could get a skilled worker out, why wouldn't you hire a skilled worker instead of what we refer to as an unskilled worker, right? So that seems to be counterintuitive to what the program should be promoting, which is to help people afford housing.
it could be, and also the 485X requires that you have a target for MWBE. Often those are, people coming in at the entry level jobs, and so yes, that may be an unintended consequence. But part of the problem is that we don't know, because
it's new.
It's new. It's a new concept to have a percentage of prevailing wage or an alternative minimum wage, right? And from what I was hearing from developers, trying to figure out, well, what is the actual cost going to be in my bottom line is really difficult. You've got to now think about, well, how many hours at this wage level am I going to have to hire? And you're going to worry about the enforcement. And the problem with enforcement from a development perspective is it's time. Your project can be held up, and so that can be just a really high cost.
Well, you could also find out that by the time the enforcement comes in, you're very far down the line and there's a point of no return, and now you're out of compliance, and now you're all of a sudden potentially not availing yourself to the benefits that you were expecting to get, purely because of the process, not because you intended to not comply.
Right. absolutely. So a lot of uncertainty about that wage requirement.
There's also the problem with the income thresholds, right? And we heard the magic number is 149 because they
the number
change,
of units.
Right, no, the number of units you can have before your requirements come in. What do you think about? I mean, a lot of people are going to say, don't we want to build as many large buildings as possible? Won't that get us more units? But what is the rationale for that? Have you heard? Or do they think they can more afford to do it if the building is larger?
I think if there's an economy of scale, if the building is larger.
Yeah.
Because I literally just had a developer the other day come to me and say, we're going to build a building in X location. We don't want to have more than 99 units because they want to keep it to an 80-20. They want to keep it to the lowest threshold possible. But that doesn't help add the number of affordable units that we need to satisfy the city. So having been you're an expert in public policy, having worked with HPD, if you were creating a plan, what would you do differently?
So I think the way to do it is to tie it to local neighborhood rents, right? We have a lot of rent data. We know we can define neighborhoods and say, okay, in that neighborhood, the market rent is X. That will only support this level of affordability, and that's the way we should do it. We've tried a lot of different things. We tried geographic exclusion areas, remember in 2007. We tried the option approach, which is what the de Blasio administration worked on. None of that works. It's complicated to look at actual market rents, but that is the deciding factor.
Right.
So we should just go there.
Makes a lot of sense. Something that I was thinking about as you were all speaking was, has anyone ever floated the idea of, rather than giving a real estate tax abatement, or maybe giving a lower tax abatement, having the city and state help subsidize these developments with lower cost loans to build their buildings so that they can actually produce product that is affordable to build and then affordable to rent versus just giving a tax abatement.
So there have been, that has been considered, and it has actually even been tried. I mean, a lot of affordable housing, as you know, gets low interest loans, low cost loans.
Right, when it's 50% or more usually though, right?
Right, but there has been consideration for lowering that threshold to make it available to more. And, I mean, it's really a question of money. It's a question of how much can the local government put its own money or its own borrowing ability on the line.
Right.
And especially the borrowing ability depends upon the city's debt limit, which is problematic.
Right. But one way or the other, if it's not collecting real estate tax, that's an income problem, right? If you're lending money, at least you're lending it at an interest rate, so you're actually making money on your money, and you're helping subsidize people. The other thing that was interesting is, Jay talked about the voucher program, and maybe making the voucher program part of the affordable program, so a developer knows that they have 20 or 30% of their units committed for. They can actually finance that because you know what the numbers are going to be, and they know that they have guaranteed rent payments, so they don't have to worry about collections. Has that ever? Do you think that has legs? I thought Jay's comment was interesting.
So a lot of 421A buildings used vouchers, right? And it did help in many, many ways. The problem is they're not project-based vouchers.
Right.
So you can't satisfy, for example, your tax credit obligations or other obligations when it's not a project-based voucher. So it makes it difficult from that perspective.
And it's hard to plan out that far too, right?
Right, and also another aspect of this is when it's not vouchers, when it's just affordable housing allocated through the lottery, people think the distribution through the lottery is fair, right? It's transparent, all of those things. Whereas what happens with a voucher, which voucher recipient did you turn down and why, and all of that gets very complicated, right? And so it is something that has been considered and used somewhat in some of the 421A buildings, but it's no substitute.
Right. And even the lottery system is difficult, right? I mean, you get...
Yeah, well, you mentioned the amount of time, too, that
I've actually
is
run
wasted,
a lottery.
it seems.
Once we ran a lottery with another group, with actually Breaking Ground, and the Actors Guild. And the amount of paperwork and the amount of legwork it takes to go through every lottery recipient, open them up, log them, get them through. The system takes so long and people are waiting for housing. Have there been discussions about streamlining the system or?
Yes. And there have been streamlining. It has been streamlined, but not enough. But part of it is that it's just a whole bunch of layers of federal regulation, state, city regulation.
People forget, right, that all this stuff goes through the state legislature. People think the mayor can just snap his fingers and get this stuff done. But it's a lot more complicated the more layers of government you add.
Yeah.
And you know that better than anybody.
And the mayor can't do anything about the federal requirements. Now, things where there might be some daylight is take more risks, right? Be willing to take more risks that if one tenant turns out to not have been qualified, right, you can swap another in,
right.
That kind of thing. So but part of the problem is that there's so much attention to any unfairness, right? And so if a constituent heard that they, gets a letter that they won the lottery, but they didn't show up on time
right.
or whatever, then they go to their city councilman and city council person and say, this was unfair, and
right.
then you get
right.
another regulation on top of everything else.
Right.
So,
Speaking of things that are kind of odd about this, the idea of property taxes being uncertain or assessed values being uncertain and how that affects marketing it. I guess, when I was at Revenue all those years ago, 421A was so simple compared to this. I think, that's another thing with taxes. There's a lawsuit against the property tax system. There's a commission that now who knows what comes of any of this. How does that work into this? Do you think that the state has to take that into consideration, that the property taxes they get for this benefit? Because the benefits are fairly generous, right? I don't think anybody's complained about that.
They are very generous. Look, the property tax system absolutely needs to be reformed. I was co-chair of that commission for a number of years, and it absolutely needs to be reformed. Will it happen without serious pushing from a court? I don't think so. It's politically so difficult,
right?
Because there are people who will be big losers. Right?
Well, yes, and if people are frightened of the unknown, right. And then you add in the fact that their taxes may be based on completely separate things. I had Martha Stark on the show a couple weeks ago talking about her lawsuit, and it reminds me of, some things you can do without changing law, going up to Albany. I know the mayor has this whole idea of getting things done, and the city of yes. What are you excited about what the mayor may be able to accomplish? Obviously, you served under Mayor Adams. What do you expect to see?
Well, I served under Mayor de Blasio, but
oh, I'm sorry.
But the city of yes is sort of a 2.0 version of something that we did, the zoning
right.
for quality and affordability, and it's critically important. It's just like going through the zoning text line by line and trying to get rid of wasteful, inefficient, duplicative regulatory mess, right? And I think they've done it's like 700 pages long. I haven't read every single word, but I've read a lot. And they're doing a very good job and making big policy decisions. Let's not mandate parking. The market will provide parking. If people
right.
want parking, the market will respond to that, right? Let's not mandate it. Let's increase the density everywhere as long as some of that density or all of that density is used for affordable housing, right? That's going to require an incentive because otherwise the affordable doesn't pay.
Right.
And that's something that we didn't get to talk about in there, which is the 485X has to work with mandatory inclusionary, with the new City of Yes uniform affordability preference, with the old versions of voluntary inclusionary housing, some of which are still around. So all of those things are going to have to work together, and there really hasn't been a lot of attention to that, right? You put the 485X requirements on top of the mandatory inclusionary requirements, and you've automatically required 5% more because of MIH than what the new 421A requires. Does that work? Nobody's done that analysis.
It sounds like a hard analysis to do.
It sounds like bureaucracy, right? And
Exactly.
and then you bring, as I think it was David Kramer mentioned, then you bring the fire department into it, right? And the fire department has their concerns and rules and regulations. So we're talking about, we're looking at just about every office to resi conversion opportunity in the city. Most of these buildings will have, if they are going to be utilized properly, will have windowless rooms. But the fire department doesn't want windowless rooms. And we understand, they want to protect the firemen. I understand that. But it doesn't sound like the left hand and the right hand do a lot of talking, and then we end up with these policies that are suggested, but they haven't been completely vetted. So, from a public policy standpoint, if you could do one thing to help fix the communication to get to a better answer, what would it be?
So I think you have to hold the city accountable for the total time that it takes, right? Every agency will say, oh, I've streamlined, I've gotten rid of the bureaucracy, et cetera. Things are going really quickly through my agency. But then it goes to fire, and then it sits there for a long time, or goes elsewhere, But somebody needs to say, the average project took this number of days, that's unacceptable.
Right.
We're going to cut it to this, and everybody's got to work on that. And whoever it is that's causing a lot of the delay, we're going to call them in and have a conversation about that, right? Because as it is now, a developer will call the deputy mayor's office. The deputy mayor's, team will go and talk to HPD and talk to fire and talk to this and talk to that. At the end of the day, you have to have some metric that says, if you are going more than X number of days, you're coming into this office and we're working it out.
I love it. I love that. My other question for you is, so there's a lot of conversation, and you talked a lot about, basically it gets to the state legislature and they don't really understand, a lot of the representatives don't really understand what they're looking at, right? Why does the state not literally hire people to do real analysis of these programs? So to really look at the economic impact of it from all points of view, from the developer side, from the contractor side, from the union side, to come up with actual policies that make economic sense versus just kind of wheeling and dealing.
Look, the housing committees have very talented staff that run the numbers, that do the pro formas. There is talent and real intelligence.
That's good to hear.
But part of the problem is you're working against a deadline, you're at the brink, you're practicing some brinkmanship, and something that happened this time around and last time around is the governor said to Rebney and the trades, you work it out. That's nobody else is seeing what's going on there. And so the committee staff that could run the numbers and say this isn't going to work,
they're not in the
are
room.
not at the table.
So that to me would be a good step in the right direction, to get the staff in the room, the people that really know.
But there's another issue here.
The behind the scenes.
It's
right?
politics,
It's
right?
politics.
From the lobbying I got to do a couple of years ago, there are a lot of people, and they must be overwhelmed with these analysis and everything. But then some of them aren't going to look at them anyway. Not the staff people, the politicians, because they know they've made up their mind, when we walked in the door.
Right.
So.
And sometimes it's deliberately obfuscated, so an analysis can't quite figure out.
Yeah.
That was my problem with the portfolio of 10. How do we know who has a portfolio of 10?
Right.
How are we going to figure that out?
Yeah, it is. Well, I want to thank you for your time. Very gracious to come. And this is a serious problem because the New York City rental vacancy rate hit 1.4% in the last housing vacancy survey, right? The last time it was that low, the Jets won the Super Bowl. So that shows you how long ago that was. But thank you, Professor Been, for your time. And thanks to everybody for tuning in. Have a great day.